Our good buddy Brian Greene, who's the CEO of the Houston Food Bank, one of the best food banks in America. And Brian, of course, teaches management here and many other courses, but it's a pleasure to have. Brian, thank you for coming and being here on the program.
Well, you know, I'm so used to this chair and being here, so everything's good. I'm still waiting. I want our little, Star Trek background on our blue screen. I'm waiting for that to really heighten things up.
I'm waiting for when you could just say, computer, please beam Brian in so we could take him to task on something.
They can simulate it as soon as they get that going, right?
Yeah, right here, man. Hey, so we're talking about leadership today. And one of the first questions that I'll often ask guests is, if you're writing a book on leadership, what would some of the chapters? But you, interestingly enough, you came in today and you said, these are the questions I'll answer. And I'm surprised that there are actually some good stuff here. But I wanted to know, the first thing you had in terms of chapters of a book, traits of a successful CEO. And let's talk about that for a little bit. You said the only must for a good CEO is to have integrity. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would always say that for not-for-profits as well.
Yeah.
Ideally, I guess so. But definitely in nonprofits. The only thing that you can't basically assume that you are bringing in on your team.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, you need to understand your own strengths and weaknesses and recognize that you don't have everything, no matter what.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're not just bringing in other people like you, and you want to identify, well, what am I not so good at? I want to make sure that I'm hiring for that, or if I'm not hiring, I'm at least from a volunteer stand bringing that in. But the only thing that I've just seen over the years that you cannot do is integrity. Because if the CEO cuts the moral corners, and quite frankly, it's easy to say, well, yeah, you should never be like that. But as you well know, you get lots of temptations. You get lots of opportunities where that's what the other people are going to want you to do, because it's more convenient at the time to not do what people are thinking you're going to do, to tell people a little bit differently. I mean, everything, just the small things from, this grant was due and there's a real problem. Let's make up an excuse rather than, look, we didn't do that. Just every one of those little moral corners that you might get tempted to cut becomes poison, I think, to your atmosphere.
Yeah.
And you can't have somebody else overcome that for you, because you're the CEO and everybody's gonna look to you. So that's kind of like the one thing that I would say you can't. Other things that most people just sort of assume, well, you must be, the next one you would pick, is like this great outgoing, speaker, extrovert. And actually, that's
sort of the idea. People have this idea of leadership, right? That they must be a good speaker, they must be charismatic. And what do you think? You sort of think that's less important?
Yeah, actually, I think it's actually more rare in successful CEOs than people realize. I think we notice the very public ones, but they're not the majority of the successful CEOs. And I remember one time we did a Myers-Briggs, the Feeding America food banks, at a conference, and all these CEOs did that. And what was shocking to me was the majority of the people rated as an introvert. And it's contrary to what most people assume. And the reality is, that sort of really outgoing personality is, it's great at the cocktail party. It will help with the fundraising.
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that you can do to be successful that it's not what tips the scale.
And you're sort of an outgoing person. You're a good speaker.
No, I'm not.
No.
I
think you are.
So let's be clear. I'm actually an introvert. I'm a performer.
There you go.
I love one-on-one.
So that performing part, even though it's maybe not a strength of yours, but others...
No, the performing part is a strength, Bob.
Oh, you're an excellent performer. Yeah. So tell me, I'll agree with everything you say, Brian. Just tell me what to agree with. But that part is not as instrumental. I mean, it's nice that you can perform. It's nice that you can speak, but it's not how the success of your organization is measured.
No, or it's not what I think. It is a useful tool, but it is not a necessary tool. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't, for instance, have to be the person who's out there. So much of what you need to do as an organization to be successful is not, getting out there and performing.
Yeah.
And the other part is, there's a difference between introversion and performing, as you well know. And so very, very famous, successful comedians, et cetera, were actually introverts.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's that, that part's not a contradiction. But no, you just see so many very successful organizations, and when the leader speaks, they're not all that dynamic. They're not all, so I would disagree that is way high up there. Higher than that.
I want to go back though a step before. You were talking about integrity, and you said that for you have to, integrity is so important because you have to understand what your own weaknesses and strengths are. As you manage the Houston Food Bank, what are the things that you have to make sure you're hiring staff for because you're not as good at?
Okay, so I hate routine and details and just bureaucracy type stuff. So like, we do just dozens and dozens of contracts, it seems, every week. And there's all these, you got to make sure you've covered this and this and that. I hate that stuff. And it's not just that I hate that, like I'll lapse on certain details. So I want to make sure that, I've got somebody who's not like that, very detail-oriented person. So our COO is great at, looking through the contracts, making sure we've got everything. I am kind of aggressive about, hey, we can make this happen.
Yeah.
A CFO who will stand up to me, about me, or we, okay, where do we know this money is going to come from, is critical. And I've actually come to really value that interplay that I find annoying. Because it's frustrating. If you're if you're the person,
if you're the gung-ho optimist, and there's always someone saying, "Oh, you can't be that optimistic."
Right. That's no fun for the gung-ho optimist.
Yeah.
But you better embrace it anyway.
But a good CEO will understand when that person is realistically speaking, and really is trying to help out the whole situation, right?
Yeah.
Without raining on a parade.
Well, obviously you don't want somebody who's just a pessimist. But you want somebody to look, I get this. I really care about the sustainability of this organization, and I'm not just going to sign off, based on hopes and dreams.
And what's your biggest strength as a leader, Brian?
It's a strength and a weakness. God, this sounds very immodest to say, but I think of things pretty good.
You think what?
I think of things pretty well.
Okay.
So I can come up with stuff.
Yeah.
So I can come up with solutions fairly quickly and stuff. And so that part, a trait that people generally want to see in a CEO, visionary leader. I can do vision, lots of vision. The weakness part is that can crowd out other people's contributions. And so you have to be...
Are you pretty aware of that?
I try, much more than I used to be.
Yeah.
So when I started, I was leading a very small food bank in Knoxville, Tennessee. And what that meant was you weren't hiring necessarily, you couldn't afford, to hire real go-getters always, And so, okay, this one person who sort of, do the visioning work and people just sort of go along was kind of more normal. As the organizations grew in size, that became a limiting thing. I used to be able to know how to do everything at the food bank, and more, it's about setting people free to do things, even if you disagree. So long as they're within reasonable parameters. And so that you kind of have to recognize that nobody's that smart as we are collectively.
Absolutely.
And part of that
That's
means...
a great revelation, whether it's early in your career or later in your career, to get that whole idea, right? That the group can make it significantly smarter, as long as you put together the right group.
Yeah. And so, I had a great example. So today we had at the food bank, visiting food banks from Louisville and the Atlanta Food Bank. And the Atlanta Food Bank had one of the absolute legends in our field as their CEO, and he was like the founder over 30 years ago. or 30 years ago, and just recently retired last year. And the organization had really atrophied. And it had been 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
It atrophied while he was there? Or?
Yes.
Oh, while he was there.
So, it had been one of the leaders, and it really had fallen behind. And while most food banks were actually growing pretty significantly, they weren't. And they actually, from an output per low-income person or a person food insecure, they actually became one of the lower in the network. And their board was clueless. They didn't know.
They were living off of the good old days.
Well, not just living off the good old days, but they were, he had this, this legend. I mean, literally, he was named like Person of the Year in Georgia. I mean, just an awesome guy.
What a big,
Yeah, and it wasn't just, undeserved. I love the guy.
I've never been Person of the Year, Georgia. You?
No. Not counting on it happening. But anyway, so they just sort of, look, we've got Bill.
Yeah.
And, Bill, whatever Bill says must be great.
Yeah.
And, if Bill didn't say it, well, it must not be important. And they just, the board, the staff, the community, they all just did that.
Yeah.
And they ended up just sort of working their way to a dead end. And they stayed in that dead end for like 10 years. And
with Bill.
With Bill. Now, 2 years, I guess, before he retired, Bill actually, I don't know, he must have had a revelation or something, but he did a shakeup. He brought on somebody as a COO and gave that person a lot of freedom, and they just started shooting up.
Wow.
So he retired while they were on a trajectory, and so they actually had 5 board members who came to visit us and had this conversation, and they were talking about that, how they just the whole group is so much more energized now, not slamming the person because they all saw how they had a role in that, but they were just relying on one person. And they relied on one person for 30 years, and it limited the organization.
Last week we had Mary Lawler here from the Avenue CDC, and she told the story of how it was a one-person organization that grew to really the most powerful CDC in the city of Houston, right? And there's a story of the food bank as well. I remember when you took over the food bank, there was the food bank, there was then Hunger Network, 2 separate organizations, and you guys have grown, and you are arguably the best food bank in America today.
No, we are actually certified as the best food bank in America today. You can go by our building, you see the giant banner that says
You're
so.
certified.
By the way.
You are certified in not only in your mind, but according to those
According to
certification
Feeding
body. Yeah. So how did that happen, Brian? I mean, some of it was leadership, some of it was happenstance, but most of it was leadership. Talk a little bit about that.
So the advantage that I brought, to the table was I had, experience, and I guess this comes to another thing is, in the nonprofit world especially, you have to keep reinventing yourself because the market doesn't force you to.
Yeah.
And this actually, one of the things I wanted to make sure we cover pretty heavily because this is a big deal. Kroger and H-E-B, or you name it, those companies, they're not constantly changing and stuff because they want to. They're doing it because they have to. Because to the extent they sort of like, whew, boy, we're done, trying to make things, painful new things happen. The other people don't, and then next thing they know, their customers are going across the street.
They can't coast like Bill did.
They cannot do it. In the nonprofit world, you can't.
Yeah.
So you have to, for whatever reason, you have to either love change or you just force yourself to keep doing the reinvention thing. So I've been doing this a long time, and I don't know, I think I actually just like change. And so I came here in the organization, as with so many food banks, and I think nonprofits in general, they didn't know what the other food banks were doing. They didn't know that they were behind by a significant margin. They didn't even know, for instance, you can measure food banks on how many pounds of food and how many poor people you have. It's a very easy calculation. And see, well, are you roughly where, you should be? Didn't know the way behind. Didn't even really know that, Houston was, just in terms of sheer volume, was getting beat by Dallas, which is not a lot smaller market, but a smaller market. So anyway, in so many different ways, it had really fallen behind when this had been a very much a leader food bank in the early days of food banking.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, he's still legend. People like myself still know Dave Williams, the original or second CEO there, great guy. He now runs Make-A-Wish Foundation nationally.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so the board didn't know, and it's kind of not their fault, but I guess it is their fault to the extent it is of all boards, where they don't realize how much they need to be benchmarking because they come with an understanding from the private sector where benchmarking happens automatically. You don't have to try to find out whether or not you're doing well. The market will tell you. Your shareholders will tell you. Your customers will tell you.
Yeah.
Ours won't.
Yeah.
So they didn't do it. They've fallen behind. So you come here. And
So you brought all those benchmarks to the
yeah.
to
So
the
I said,
board.
hey, here's where we really are. This is Houston, and this is where happenstance is very fortunate. Houston's a very positive city.
Yep.
If you have a pretty good plan, Houstonians want to make it happen.
They do.
And so, unlike my last market, New Orleans, which is actually a much more pessimistic, frankly, market, it was relatively easy to get major donors.
And you got your board motivated to do this?
Yeah.
You had a good board chair at the time?
But it evolved.
Yeah, yeah.
What we had was a board that was not at the level that you needed for this kind of output.
Yeah.
And that was, we got some board leadership who was willing. You remember Matt Winter?
He's a buddy of mine still to this day. Yeah.
Great guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was Matt who really got that. You know, this is an organization that needs to raise significantly more money or more dollars per year, and an organization that needs to be CEO type thinkers. Because there's so many opportunities, and you don't want that kind of, which is another thing we're interested to talk about, you know, just basically people in their role. If you're in middle management, you see the world differently. And when you have a board these can be people, they're middle management at a big corporation. I mean, you get a high salary, you're responsible for a lot, but you still see the world differently.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have the CEO of a small organization than the middle manager of a large one any day, except for some people.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he got that.
Unless they bring a lot of funding with them, then we're okay.
They rarely do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of, you know, when you get these big corporate placements, there's not that much money that follows anyway. So anyway, the board changed. You know, we rolled out this, people got behind it, and we were able to make a lot of changes happen. So
how long did it take you to get to that point where you felt like, wow, I've made a big, big difference here at the food bank?
Here in Houston?
Yeah.
I guess it didn't really hit till we finally made it into the new building.
Yeah.
And all these things started just happening, just falling down like dominoes by that point.
How long have you been in the new building now?
So we've been there, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
5 years. We've been there 5 years.
And you've been the head of the food bank about
10 years.
10 years.
And so, like, I hated that old building.
Yeah.
It was, you know, it just became more. Literally, when I interviewed for the job, I toured the building, sat down with the hiring committee, and they asked me what I thought. I said, "You got to get out of that building."
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on to other stuff here.
No, I wanted to ask you. So, what is your next? You know, as a leader, and you know, personally, what is your next career move for you? Now you're the head of the best food bank in the country. What do you do next as a leader? Because every leader reaches these points where they have to think, do I just stay here and sort of create a legacy, or do I move on? What do you think?
So I have I guess it's a somewhat scary thought because I literally have nowhere else to go. I mean, not that I couldn't get hired, but like, there's no better place than Houston for what I do.
Yeah.
Not just, you know, okay, there's a building, because the reality is in 5 years, there will be 2 or 3 or 4 food banks with better facilities than we have, you know, because we leapfrog each other.
Yeah.
But, you know, God, you know, the resources, the positive, and the need, they're all here. So there's not a market that is better for what I really like to do. I have no interest in, you know, running Feeding America. I don't think I have the right personality to do that anyway.
Your current job is better than running Feeding America, though.
Well, I don't know if it, I mean, it is for me.
Yeah.
And running Feeding America is a fundamentally different job that I would not hire myself for.
Yeah.
So I need to actually stay here. So I need to be, that needs to be okay. And then, you know, the fact that, you know, gosh, that's another 15 years or so, because I can't retire at 65 because we decided to have young, you know, children pretty late in life.
Yeah.
So
It's because you married a woman 20 years younger than you. Or
yeah,
something.
well, yeah. So it's got to work. And so, I have, right now we're doing our next reinvention, what we call Food for Change. We're not going to talk about that.
So 15 years from now, you're going to be at Houston Food Bank?
Yeah. And I know we've got this new change, which I think is going to completely change the way food banks think about output. I mean, we're very excited about it. That's got, 8-10 years of, we're going to be of trying to figure this out and make it work. It's going to be a long process. But then I'll have a few more years, and I do worry that people can get tired of you.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get fired, so hopefully it'll work out that long.
Before class, I was talking to one of our students, Emily, and she was asking about underperforming organizations, and I wanted to talk a little bit about underperforming organizations. When you see an underperforming organization, what do you think? If a group hires you and says we're underperforming, and you visit with them, I mean, what are some of the things that you're looking for with an underperforming organization to get them going again?
That's interesting. So if you were a consultant,
Yeah.
say like Sterling or somebody like that, and they David Weegley says, I like this organization, but they're underperforming, and bring you in. What are you gonna see?
Yeah.
First off, I applaud them for recognizing it, because I think in most cases they don't. When the general community, when you talk about nonprofits need to get better, they immediately fixate on bad. And that's really not most of the problem. It's not being great.
Yeah. Failure to be great.
It's failure to be great is the issue. You think about it in the private sector, the companies from 30 years ago looked good. They would just get their butts kicked now, because we've just gotten so much better at doing almost everything. And that's what the issue is, I think, in nonprofit land is lots of good organizations, but they're not necessarily great. So the things that the great one, the ones that are good, very often lack. They've not invested enough or gotten people to invest enough in the kind of admin stuff that nobody wants to give them credit for. And this is...
Give us an example of that.
Well, just how much money they spend on IT, how much money they're willing to spend on fundraising, or do they have strong leadership beyond the CEO, or are they just the only person they can only afford to hire one real hot shot, but they don't have a good good bench strength basically, and those are things that unfortunately in the nonprofit land we punish nonprofits if they try to invest that way.
Yeah.
And it's very short-sighted thinking. The whole, the Cherry Navigator evaluation scheme is, part of that, where you just say, well, it's all about having minimal fundraising, minimum admin. Well, that's also kind of your competency in having the social workers or whomever really have what they need, the leadership, the materials, that they need to be successful.
And we've had that TED Talk by that guy, Dan.
Denaroli, I think he goes too far.
But I think he makes a really nice point, though, right? About the whole idea of focusing on fundraising, it's okay, and focusing on admin. And
but that's the problem is our donors, you may say, I don't want to do that, but your donors may punish you. So you kind of almost have to get over a hump. You got to be able to get away with going ahead and investing in your admin long enough, because it doesn't have immediate payoff, long enough to really get your overall service delivery competency up. So that would be kind of like the first thing.
Yeah.
Have you really done that enough?
What else?
Are you really challenging yourself to see what you do from the standpoint of the impact on the clients? In nonprofit world, we are way too in love with pretty stories. Our donors are way too in love with pretty stories.
Donors love pretty stories.
Yeah, and so this is what they reward us for, and this is when we talk to each other. This is how we tell each other what we're doing. We've got this thing, and then it makes this difference, and then that next level deep. Well, how many people is that? How many of them had that change, and how many of them didn't? How did that not looking at this as science, I guess.
Yeah. Do you tell pretty stories in your fundraising events?
Of course.
Yeah.
So all of what there's kind of like what you have to do to be great. And then there's what you need to do to fundraise.
Yeah.
Don't lie fundraising, but the reality is we serve about 800,000 people a year. One of the things that I learned is if you tell people 800,000 people a year, they will give you less money than if you tell them one. So we tell them one. Now, it's not that we say we only serve one. We only serve little Susie.
Right.
But yes, I'm going to tell you about little Susie. I'm not going to talk about 800,000 because what happens is then you say, well, then my money is a drop in the bucket. I can never solve this, yada yada, and they give less money.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I don't know. So you have to kind of deal with that sort of that dual track.
Any other sort of key things about underperforming organizations that you think? I mean, for me, it's some of the things we've talked about earlier. It is leadership. It is vision. I mean, some of those things I think are strikingly lacking in some organizations that I've seen.
Well, there also can be an incredible naivete.
Yeah.
And this goes, we've talked about this in the class, is in the for-profit world, nobody starts a barbershop without knowing how barbershops run, who are the other barbershops, where do they get their money, all that kind of stuff. Most nonprofits are started without ever knowing that about the landscape they're going into.
So many people just want to start nonprofits.
They just, you just start it, and then you sort of like, well,
Professor Greene, help me start tell me what I need to do to start a nonprofit. It's not an uncommon thing.
Yeah. So, research.
Yeah.
Really getting, an understanding of, how this all works.
Yeah.
And this goes back to why I like this program, because I can tell you for a fact, we're talking about stuff that I don't see anywhere else you're getting. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to bash Rice. I love, but it was an interesting thing. I talked to a group of people who had gone through the CERT program, and they'd asked me to speak to them on I don't know what, but so I was just to see if we had a level set, So I said, so you guys, have you talked to any about the double bottom line that you have to deal with in nonprofits? And none of them were familiar with what I was talking about. And that's the kind of thing that's like, to me, that is absolutely critical to understanding effective nonprofit management. Is you first got to recognize how we have a double bottom line here, and you've got to learn how to manage them both and evaluate yourself on both and all that. So we do that.
I want to switch topics. I want to talk a little bit about how successful, this is one of your lines, that successful people often misattribute their success. So what is the secret of your success? And then let's talk about how we've...
See, then you're going to tell me how I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so, there's actually, I read an article about this years ago, and I thought it was fascinating. And there have been some research done on this, how people, when they're successful, you tell, a story, you think back. And it's not that you're necessarily, just sort of being grandiose and like, it's all me because I'm Superman or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's actually, hundreds, if not thousands of variables that went into it. But that's more than your brain's going to absorb. Yeah. So, you pick a couple, and you're generally going to pick the ones that seem a little more favorable to how we want to view ourselves.
Yeah.
And
like you always say, that one of the secrets to your success is that you're good looking. And it's just, for the rest of us, we think, well, it's nice that he thinks that, but
it's nice that he thinks that, yes, because somebody has to. So for me, it's like, oh yeah, you figure things out pretty well.
Yeah.
And that's been one of those. I think that, I can speak well, and so I can present the case if I believe in it. And one of the things I learned is, I can't speak for the damn if I don't believe in it, which is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So, those definitely are secrets. But I think, the part that is scary is I can be wrong. And so, we did a play, right? We did a $55 million capital campaign because we were going to actually make huge change in the way food banks thought about how they build support. Mm-hmm. And it worked. And so 2 weeks ago, our board just agreed to do a $32 million new campaign that's all basically this food for change and everything, which I think is going to be, fundamental change, and this is going to end up generating new support, and it's going to be different. Mm-hmm. boy, I hope I'm right. Because that can be the thing.
Yeah, because I want you to be there 15 years from now. So I think that's important. One of the other things we talked a little bit about this whole nonprofit challenge, the lack of automatic guides, how it's easy to slack off.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
So, the Feeding America Network actually just did a new contract a year ago, and there were a number of us that we really fought for this. And when I say fought for this, the Feeding America contract is different in that it's not like the food banks debating with Feeding America. Feeding America is the national certifying organization, but it's the 200 members trying to get most of the 200 members to go along with this. And what we see is all around the country exactly the phenomenon I talked about in Atlanta, only in many cases worse, where the board, they don't know. They're the ones in charge, but they don't know how to evaluate. And so, what we were saying is, look, you have to present to your board a standardized dashboard that shows along a set of metrics how you're performing compared to a set of peers. And you have to do it, whether you want to or not. Your board chair has to attend a webinar where they learn more about the network and what other food banks are doing. So certain things, to really force more knowledge, we had to fight for it.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people, and they wouldn't be that, yes, I want to keep my board in the dark. Nobody said that. But there are always reasons why, well, make this perfect or whatever, before we could go along with that. And that's necessary because if the board is not getting a benchmarking type picture, their clients, in our case, our agents, say, hey, we're the ones giving them food for next to nothing. Of course they love us. The ultimate clients in turn getting that. Of course they love this. The charitable community, well, they're comparing us to a church pantry. And of course the big food bank looks good compared to this church pantry. Look how big it is. It has forklifts and racks. And so it could be podunk compared to its potential. And no one in the community would know.
Right.
And so there's no...
So it's easy when you're an organization like that to slack off. Now conversely though, there are organizations where, someone from a foundation decides they're going to work into the nonprofit world and they take over these sort of medium-sized nonprofits. And what they find is they can't slack off. So there are people who join nonprofits and then they realize, wow, I really need to raise money and fast.
Oh, okay. So this goes back to, you've got your track of raising money from the donors. They're not the people who actually experience the service. You got there, but you've got bills and here's your revenue. Yeah, that fundraising, once you set your budget and now you got to raise this much money and you got to try and raise it again and again and again and usually add to it. Heck yeah, that's not.
I mean, we see nonprofit directors all the time that are like scrambling because it's just all about raising money. They didn't.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that that's where the money in nonprofit is, because that raising the money from the donors, that's where it's the constant scramble.
Yeah,
that's where they can't slack off. The delivery of service is the problem because that's what we're there for.
Yeah,
and that's where geez. Did you serve 20 people this year? Is that good? Is that bad? How do we know? How much of a difference did you make for those 20 people? Is that good? Is that bad? How do we know? That is the part that truly matters, and that's the part that there's no automatic check mechanisms.
I'm going to do another question, then we're going to go to the Twitterverse and get questions from people who have tweeted them in. When you look around town, high-performing nonprofits, who are the couple of nonprofits that sort of spring to mind, like, wow, they're doing the job?
Well, you just said Mary Lawless CDC. I think the Alley Theater. So in general, one of the things I would say, when I talk about customers, is the I guess the museums, the arts, the performance. They generally do much better because they do have the paying customers who are doing that. I do think that they also then attract some pretty darn good leadership. And I think a lot
of those museums and arts organizations, I think what's interesting when you've served on those boards is that you realize ticket sales amount for maybe 20%, maybe 30%. It's not as much as you might imagine.
But the board members and the donors are patrons.
A lot of individual giving also at those places, sort of larger amounts of
Yeah,
individuals.
and those people, they go to the symphony, and so
there's a product that the donors are getting.
And so and I think they have.
So the Alley and the Avenue CDC.
Yeah, I mean those are.
Would you do another one?
Just off the top of my head, children. No, sorry, I don't mean to do it this way, but yeah, children at risk.
I'll take that.
I mean, it's like
that's a good answer.
I don't know how they don't know. I'm supposed to look at you. They don't know the people I'm supposed to be ignoring over there. So I actually first got introduced to you guys when I was blown away with your research material, because in my career I had never seen anybody take this kind of research so seriously about the evaluations that you did in your annual report. And it's like, hey, for the first time, because I don't like using bad data. I don't like using stuff that I can't say, yes, this is a good number I can hang my hand on. Most of the stuff that people give me, I won't use because I can't trust it. And it was like, oh, look at all this stuff I can trust. And you get to do that. And then I found out how good you guys were at lobbying. So like, as an advocacy organization, you guys are stunning. So it's like, we can just kind of piggyback off of you a lot. And so, you've done a great job, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's go to the Twitterverse. Stephanie Bearfield wants to know, let's see, leadership's not a born skill. So what was it that made you such a great leader? And how long did it take you to model great leadership?
And that's one of the things.
She's working with the assumption you're a great leader.
Yeah, so that would be the thing is, if your head is that big, you're not going to be a good leader. And, it's like, so I'm not just trying to, be modest. It's like, no. As we said, I can say my bad attributes. I got a horrible memory. I'm just like, I can't work a room worth a damn.
Yeah.
I am so grateful that, we have other people like Amy Reagan, our Chief Development Officer, et cetera, who are so much better at getting all those personal relationships going, because I'm conceptual. I like that. I do that and talk about it, but I'm not a great people person. You're
a good people person.
I know. I mean, I'm good working with you because you're tolerant. But but you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's like, no, it was like, you get a great team.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be that great a leader. You just have to not be stupid.
Yeah, that's a lesson people really, and we talk about this, the book that we read is Get the Right People on the Bus, but we almost can't stress that enough, right? So surround yourself with people better than you.
Yeah, and so one of the interesting things about managers is like, I hate it when you got the manager who wants to take credit, because the reality is when you're a leader, you can't give it away anyway, right? If your team does amazing things and you say, and it's because of Bob and Susie and whatever, everybody says, man, you were sure smart to have with them. And you're like, you're going to win no matter what. So never ever take credit, right? So you shouldn't be threatened by the people down. But sure enough, so many people in middle management, yes, they're threatened by that because they kind of see this ladder and somebody else is trying to get in the, and it just doesn't, if they could just see the world the way we see the world, when we look down, it's that person who's threatened by it, that's the person we don't want rising. It's the person who's not that we want rising. Yeah. So, good people around you, recognizing what your own weaknesses are, but that's the tricky part, right? Because I don't think most people are all that good at that, which is why I agree with, two things. One, you need testing. I love the different sites. Do the different ones. Try and learn stuff, and you need honest people to tell you how full of it you are. Yeah. There was a famous Eric Fromm. He was a philosopher guy. He said that no one can reach their true human potential outside of a loving relationship. And his point was, in a loving relationship, you get the mirror.
Yeah.
And you really need the mirror. And as a leader, as so many people, they don't want to hold a mirror up to you. They want to hold the pretty picture up to you. Yeah, Bob, here's you. They want to do that. And you need the other thing.
And there's different ways that staff do, a lot of times it could be teasing, but if you understand, half said in jest is half said in truth, sometimes that works, with your staff. They feel, anyway. Hey, Christian Arnold wants to know, he said one of this week's topics is everyday leadership. How do you impact the lives of people who work at the Houston Food Bank on a daily basis?
So one of the things that I used to do badly, I was much more gruff, because I am very just matter of fact, and I'm never satisfied.
Yeah.
And so I acted never satisfied. And one day, one of the employees at the food bank in New Orleans, she said to me, "What are you trying to accomplish?" And that one, that was one of those.
Wow.
Every once in a while, those random,
Yeah.
random things. Like, yeah, what am I trying to accomplish in each one of my interactions? Am I trying to, puff up, or am I, pulling down? And it's just like, it was kind of my wake up call. And it took me years to get noticeably better at, what I do every day is I try it and go around, and when I see that person, I'm giving them that happy greeting. I'm giving that customer service attitude that I want them projecting to others. And so that's kind of what I would say.
Do you find, having taught these classes, that, well, I'll just say I have found teaching these classes and interviewing leaders, I think I'm a better leader because I've learned things from others. I mean, do you feel like even with these classes you're learning stuff?
So one of the things that the food bank does, we partnership with lots and lots of organizations.
Yeah.
And because, the students coming in and almost all of them are with different organizations, I've had to have a number of my otherwise naive understanding that was just overly based on my own experiences with a food bank challenged. And so I think that has helped me, frankly, be more sympathetic to the differences other organizations and other people face. So from a collaborative standpoint, I think that's helped me quite a bit in a very short time.
Wow. Very good. Hey, let's do some shorter answers on some of these.
Is that a hint?
Yeah, no. I just want to make sure we get more questions in our last couple minutes, last 15 minutes. Who's been one of your great motivators in your life? Who's made you a better leader?
The beauty is, in our role as CEOs, then we work for boards, and then there's attributes or things that we pull, and there's been so many people. There was this zone manager for Kroger when I was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he was real busy, as these store people always are, but when you sat down and you talked to him, you were all that mattered. And so you could tell this guy's so busy, and you feel bad, I need to talk to you, but when we sat down, it's like,
he was listening.
Yeah, he was listening, and that was not my trait at all.
Yeah.
And that was one. But almost every I've been very lucky with my board chairs. I've had really smart people that brought something different that I could realize I needed to change. So many.
Adrian Pierce wants to know, what advice do you give new CEOs starting their own organization?
What advice do I give new? Lots of advice, far more than I could say in this. So, Adrian, why don't you next time you call me up?
What would be the one piece of advice?
Well, I don't know. It depends on the circumstances, because the first thing I would do is I'd ask a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And without knowing the answers to those questions, I wouldn't know what advice to give.
Okay. Alrighty. How often do you guys give feedback to employees at the Houston Food Bank?
So the idea is, I love what GE is doing, where they're actually just dumping, the annual review, and you want to make that just part of the ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
So we actually do performance reviews twice a year. It's been all about simplify it. We took the numbers away. I hated the numbers. The numbers were only ever used as a weapon against us.
We talked about this when you guys started the numbers. Remember, our organization was all about trying to
bureaucratize.
Trying to create more bureaucracy. And so we used to have no numbers. And the staff was like, yeah, we need some numbers and so we both of our organizations sort of flip-flopped on that. So it's sort of an interesting thing.
Actually, I had to.
I prefer the no numbers.
I argued for years, and finally, I just had to do it by fiat. Because the HR, they love that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's all, if we had saints as managers, numbers would be fine. We don't. We have humans as managers, and the humans will give that person the higher number they deserve, so they don't have to make it awkward, and then that bites you later.
Jonathan wants to know if you could teach. Well, this is very similar to a previous question. Jonathan wants to know if you could teach one thing about leadership, what would you focus on?
Well, I don't think you can teach it. It would be the integrity, because it's the kind of like the thing you got to have. But the thing is, I don't think that's the thing you got to bring to the table. And it's just like, it's not that you can't get away. It's just like, what, your organization is never going to be worth my money. And I hope no one else's money if you don't have, not just average integrity, because I don't think most people will cut the moral corner when they're pushed. You need to be the person who doesn't.
Jordan Klein wants to know the single most rewarding thing about being the CEO of the Houston Food Bank.
It is, and I'm not just, this isn't marketing, this is just like, it is so cool that we get, when we do something right, how much of an impact doing it right has. And of course, when we do something wrong, it's bad, but we do more things right than wrong, so.
John Bagucki, how many staff do you have, paid staff, and how many volunteers?
It's like right now, 220 at any given time paid.
Paid staff.
And right now we're running at a rate about 64,000 unduplicated volunteers a year.
How many?
64,000.
Wow. More than the Houston Rodeo?
A lot more. We actually,
I remember when you passed the rodeo, you were all excited.
Yeah, we set that as our goal. When we were at 7,000 a year, we said we're going to beat the rodeo.
Wow. Maria Escobar, what do you want your legacy to be at Houston Food Bank?
Well, yeah. So the first thing, I think every CEO's got to kind of have this little tinge, because the next CEO is going to come in and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that."
Can you believe he did that? You guys
Thank goodness you have me.
You guys thought Brian was doing a good job.
So you kind of have that naive, hope. God, I hope everything is so good that he can't do it, but it's going to happen, right? So I guess what you're really looking for that sustain it, is that it's just going to keep right on ticking. Mm-hmm. Too many people fail to really take seriously the "you will leave" part, and you let it become all about you. And I think going back to my friend Bill, it's not that he wanted that, but it became that, right? And so I'm an opinionated guy. If I stay here till retirement, I'll have been here a long damn time. I could make the community think they can't do this without me, and that would be a huge disservice to the food bank, right? Because, of course they can. Look at all these other cities, but people tend to personalize stuff, right? That's why you have a CEO as a spokesperson, because people, I want to meet the CEO, I want to see whether or not believe in that person. Well, you're buying into a whole organization, that you're buying into. But so to make sure that that's not what happens.
Mehmet Okumas wants to know, what's your biggest fear as a CEO? I used to, Bob Zinke, I don't know if you remember Bob Zinke, he's president of Kroger, chair of our board for a while, and he used to always talk about this in terms of what keeps me up late at night. What's the thing that keeps you up late at night?
It is so easy for us to have a huge scandal. We can have a huge scandal in so many ways, and as you know, those can be devastating.
That could be it too.
We can have a foodborne illness. We can have like a major crime. We can have a horrible accident. And so you try and run things to minimize that risk as much as possible, but that risk doesn't go away.
Yeah. Let me see. Elisa Flores wants to know about solar-powered meals. You guys have solar-powered meals?
I don't know what solar-powered meals are.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either. Okay.
We have solar panels. We have 440 solar panels on our roof.
Maybe that's it. That's solar-powered meals right there. Your annual budget again is?
$29 million.
$29 million. And Kyle Dudzinski, do you encourage employees to be creative?
So, to me, like one of the joys in the food bank is because we have so much stuff, we have so much resources, and we can do. It's like a playground. We can make lots of cool things happen for other organizations, and so we have, and everyone hears this. We have kind of like, it's what we call a culture of yes. Yes, if somebody complains to me that you said no, I don't feel bad about overruling you.
Do you guys talk about having a culture of yes?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And it's it's because we have just this constant flow of dollar value and all these other 65,000. We can say yes to stuff that you don't quite know how you're going to say yes to a lot, right? So what we want is, people who realize, you know what, if you made a mistake saying yes, it's okay. Don't say no when you could have said yes positively, right? So you start with that, and then you say, okay, I don't have to agree with everything. Because what we really want to do is free people to do things, to cut new deals, because there's no way, as many things as we're involved in, that I approve them all, or I even know them all, right? So yeah, we have, we just tried to do this thing that this guy wanted to do a 200-acre farm with us. Personally, growing food costing 30 cents a pound when we can get the surplus food at 9 cents a pound doesn't make too much sense. But we have these staff members who are really passionate about that, and we want them happy. Fine. See if you can make this work. They worked on trying to make it work. That didn't work. We got other initiatives. As I said, we do, God, it must be like a dozen new agreements a week. And most of them now, they don't happen at my level. They don't even happen at Stan, the CEO's level, although he cuts lots of fun deals. So we do things like, we've got 2 groups that are doing libraries in Africa, that they do it at our facility because we have the resources. Then we do the thing with the rescue bank where they do the pet food. We do, we've got Heart.
Said yes to a lot of things.
Yeah, we've got Heart at our facility. We're now actually an HISD school at the Houston Food Bank.
You have Brighter Bites over there?
Yeah, Brighter Bite, which I love that one. So there's just, and this is why every once in a while we'll go ahead and try and do the laundry list for the board of, okay, well, here's all the, the different collaborations, not just the normal food distribution ones we do. And it is now correct that the vast majority of them, I'm just sort of informed.
Okay, a couple of final questions. This will be my last one from the Twitterverse. Maya Bean asking a question that I'll often ask. Work-life balance. So many CEOs have sit in this chair and say, no work-life balance. I'm thinking about work all the time. How about you, Brian?
Well, wait a minute. You just qualified it so work-life balance. I'm not that. So first off, I'm not the socialite fundraiser. This is one of my weaknesses. Right.
Yeah.
I get money by, hey, here's our plan. Is that a good idea?
But there aren't many of us that are the socialite fundraisers, though. There aren't really many. Maybe at the museums or the arts people.
Don't you think, most of the high dollar nonprofits, $1 million+ budget ones, I think,
You think so?
Yeah, they're out.
I think the arts people, but I'm not sure. Anyway.
So I, no, I don't do that much.
Yeah.
And so I got married late, and we had
Thank
kids.
goodness you found someone.
Yeah, I know.
We're very proud of you.
Someone who's tolerant. And so we have 2 young kids, and so I just look, I'm not going to be the absentee dad. I'm not going to do it. And so no, I am home with the kids most of the time. This week is unusual. So 4 nights I have to work. Counting this. This doesn't really work.
Darn it.
I'm enjoying this. But this is unusual. Most nights I'm home for most of their football practices.
Yeah.
The weekend I might work half a day on Saturday. Otherwise, my weekend is generally free, and so there's times I'm out. But no, absolutely not. I've got pretty good. Now, am I thinking about work?
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's how it works.
that doesn't count, because I'd be thinking about something. So I don't know about you, but
I enjoy thinking about work.
I've simplified my life. I have no outside hobbies. I play the guitar and stuff, but I don't do anything that I don't play golf or something.
Yeah.
If I'm not working, and our extended, so many of our relationships are fun relationships.
Yeah.
I'm with the family, and that's it.
Yeah. Your favorite restaurant in Houston?
Well, let's see. Got to go with America's. Not just in Houston, but my wife and I, we saw the Van Halen concert the other night at Woodlands Pavilion.
And then you went to America's?
We went to the Americas up there, before that. Yeah. I love that. The churrasco steak.
Yeah.
And, the plantains.
Yeah. And is there a secret hidden venue, a sort of a place in Houston that not many people know about that you really like?
Humboldt Area Football League facilities, or over in Humboldt, maybe. That's where our kids.
You spend a lot of secret time over there.
Yeah, a lot of secret time there.
And when they make the Brian Greene story in Hollywood, who do you think is the most logical person to play you, Brian?
The most logical person to play me?
Yeah.
Clooney. Yeah.
George. Yeah, very good, George.
Why are they laughing?
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Doesn't make any sense.
Brian
to me.
Greene, the work that you do is amazing, man. Thank you so much for the work, and thank you so much for being with us here this evening and for talking to us about leadership.
Thanks, Bob.
All righty.
Happy to
Take
be here.
care. Hey, we'll see you guys next time here in the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Until then, work hard.